Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the She Run Strong podcast, powered by Coach Perry. As you can maybe see, if you're listening, you won't be able to see, but if you are watching this on YouTube, I am flying solo today. Nikki, unfortunately, isn't here. Well, not unfortunately for her, because she's on a lovely family holiday in Mexico. So I'm running solo today while she's taking a very well-deserved break. But I'm not going to be completely on my own, as I do have a brilliant expert joining me today, and we are going to be discussing GLP-1 agonist or antagonist. Sorry, I think I've agonist receptors, and I've messed that up. But as we go, and I'm really excited for this because it is, of course, a hot topic. And we're going to go dive into a little bit as to how they work, what to look out for if you are using these as a female runner. And then later on, we're also going to be discussing a few aspects in and around gut health. And as I mentioned, I've got an expert joining me here today, Dr. Linia Patel. Doc Patel, welcome to the She Run Strong podcast. So lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation, to see you again.
Yeah, it's I had the honor of presenting with Dr. Patel at a conference in Cape Town very recently. And just to introduce Dr. Patel, she's a women's health dietitian, a performance nutritionist, and is also a public health researcher practicing out of London as well as Milan. And as I mentioned, got to present with you recently. But Doc, Linia, please tell us a little bit about you and your work, and perhaps your private. You enjoy some exercise and running yourself as well?
Yeah, so I'm born and bred in Zambia, and I'm a South African trained dietitian. And then after doing my community service, I came over to the UK. So a lot of my clinical practice has been in the UK, in London, and then moved over to Milan for my PhD. And so now I'm literally blessed to live the best of both worlds, kind of in between Milan and London. And I am a runner. I love running. And so I've kind of done a couple marathons, done some triathlons, but at the moment I am doing high rocks training.
Excellent. Like many runners have that conversion into the high rocks world, that the pull is strong, I'm sure. So are you enjoying that?
Oh, I'm absolutely loving it, actually. And I'm really hoping that my running helps me, kind of get ahead a little bit more, because, I am very much a strength trainer as well, but running is my real love. And usually that's what people sometimes don't like in those races. So I'm hoping that I'm able to kind of gain some good time in the running part.
Yeah, that's excellent. So I've had a few friends, colleagues, athletes who have converted from running to high rocks, and it definitely helps because those 1K or 8 times 1K repeats I will definitely start taking it out of you. But that's awesome, and excited to have you here. And thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And I did mess up that intro a little bit, but the GLP-1 receptor agonists. So we're talking things like Ozempic, which is become quite a colloquial term, but that is obviously just one of many types of these kinds of medicines. What exactly are they, and perhaps why are they becoming so popular at the moment?
Yeah, well, GLP-1 actually is a natural hormone, and it's released in the gut after we eat, and its role is basically to regulate blood sugar, signal from your intestine to your brain that you're full, and to just be part of that whole digestion metabolism. And so what the drugs have done is they've just modified a molecule on the natural kind of existing innate hormone. And that slight change means that actually the medication resists breakdown from one of the enzymes, and it's an enzyme called DPP4. And that means that's an important one, because naturally in the body, the enzyme after we eat hangs around, but it doesn't hang around for long, Shona. It hangs around for about a minute and a half. And so what these medications do is they increase the amount of GLP-1 in our bodies 5 to 10-fold.
Okay.
And also they hang around much, much longer. So with some of the the kind of long-lasting agents, they can be around in the body for a week. And that's why, the typical dosage of the way that we take them is that we inject once a week.
Okay. And so why are they becoming so popular? Well, I mean, I know that it's used as a weight loss tool, right? And so are they quite effective? Is that why they are becoming so popular at the moment?
Yeah, and so I guess, so the fact that they kind of work on this, the GLP-1 hormone, that basically means that you feel fuller for longer. So it does a number of things, and it actually works in 3 different areas. It works in your intestine to basically slow down how food is moving along the intestine. So you feel fuller. So a lot of my clients will basically say, I have no appetite. So the fact that you have no appetite means that you eat less, which is one of the reasons why you lose weight, you know. It also works in your brain, because we know that in your brain you also release some GLP-1. And in your brain, it dampens what we call food noise. And it's a term that has just really come into being since these medications have kind of come out. And it's basically some people experience a more persistent thought process around food or a pull towards food than other people. And so it's just that noise is dampened, so that you no longer almost crave the foods you used to crave. And so that again reduces caloric intake because you're no longer necessarily having that desire to go towards the biscuit tin or the biscuit or the sweet table in the office, for example.
Yes.
And then also, and it also works in terms of enhancing our blood sugar levels as well. So a combination of all those things means that basically it's literally revolutionized weight loss. And it's now being touted to actually being as effective as bariatric surgery, but obviously much more accessible than bariatric surgery. So what we're seeing in the studies is that we got weight loss of about 15 to 21% of people's body weight. So it works really, really well, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't come without its kind of side effects. And so I guess, the question you asked me, Shona, was why are people so drawn to it?
Yeah.
And particularly, I suppose, if we're honing into the women that are listening to this podcast, it's, I'm a women's health dietitian and I work a lot in the menopause space. And weight is whilst it's a very sensitive topic, it is one of the big reasons that people come to see me in my clinical practice. And we know that what happens as we go through the midlife is there's changes in our hormones. That means we've got less estrogen, less testosterone, and that has an impact on the amount of muscle mass that we have. We know that muscle mass is metabolically more active than fat mass. So overall, it just does mean that weight loss becomes harder. Doesn't mean it's inevitable, that weight gain is inevitable, but weight gain is also the norm. So a lot of the studies have shown that the average weight gain is around 5.6 kilograms in the perimenopause years.
Yes.
And then there's also some other research that shows that weight gain is more visceral fat, and that's fat around your abdomen, and so some studies show that even if a woman in her 30s or her 40s is eating the same amount of calories, just because of those hormonal changes, there's an increase of at least 5 to 10% visceral fat. So that basically means that we metabolize our carbohydrates, our pasta, our potatoes slightly different. So it doesn't mean that we need to cut them out, but we just need to be strategic about when we are perhaps eating them. And all that to basically say, women in the midlife struggle with weight. Weight gain is a real issue. And so I can see the attraction if they've struggled and suffered with managing their weight the whole life, that if someone is offering you something that feels like a magic bullet, and in terms of managing your appetite, it is a magic bullet. But in terms of the whole picture, it's not a magic bullet, because we know that losing weight, there's so much more to it than just losing weight.
But that's what's going to actually be my next question. I mean, it sounds, for years there's been this, if I could take a pill to make me lose weight, people would, I mean, inevitably human beings are generally quite lazy and we would like the easy way out. And so, you mentioned some of the risk factors towards this, and what are some of the risks necessarily when using these GLP-1 agonists?
Well, so I suppose I'll kind of share what I see in my clinical practice. It might be that perhaps women are struggling with the digestive issues linked with it, because obviously food is moving much slower through the gut. That might be nausea, that might be constipation, that might be very eggy burps. It also obviously has an impact on the fact that you're not eating as much. Your energy levels naturally, because food is fuel, are just going to decrease. And so it might then be dizzy spells, poor energy, fatigue. And those are probably the side effects that come with the drug. But, the research is showing that even though you have those mild side effects, they're not enough to necessarily deter people to continue taking them, because they're so effective at kind of getting them to lose the weight. And sometimes it's the fact that, you've got that weight loss that is almost the elation that you need to kind of push you past some of those the symptoms that you might be feeling that might be a little bit kind of aggravating to the experience.
And So that just ties in so well with this next question I wanted to ask, because we speak a lot on the podcast in and around making sure that you're fueling enough for
Yeah,
your running, because one of the things that I see in practice more often than not is that females are not fueling enough, because there's
yeah,
this constant tug or pull between wanting to manage their weight in this time, but also trying to balance that with the exercise that they're doing. And so
yeah.
does that have a negative effect in terms of training and perhaps performance for females who are running, and balancing that out? How do you advise them with that?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And obviously, being a performance nutritionist, for me, it's very much around, well, high performing athletes are fueled athletes. And so for me, GLP-1 medications can affect training in a few important ways. The first, obviously, being energy intake. And I've seen it time and time again. Women will be active. And so what tends to happen, the more active you are, your body
Mm.
adapts by increasing your appetite so that you get the fuel that your body needs to get the adaptations to the stimulus of that exercise. But
Yes.
when you have GLP-1 medications in there, it might mean that the innate signals of feeling hungry are then ignored. Over a couple of days, over a couple of weeks, that means that you're just not getting enough fuel coming in. Now, in the short term, that'll impact energy levels, which means runs will feel so hard, your legs will feel so heavy, you will not be recovering. And then that might, over time, impact your immune system. You get every cold that's flying around, your mood is dampened. You're not sleeping as well. We also know from a micronutrient point of view that GLP-1 antagonists lower the pH of your stomach acid. And there's certain
Okay.
micronutrients like B12 and iron that need you to have a slightly higher pH to be absorbed. So then there's an increased risk also of having a micronutrient deficiency. So energy, obviously, if you're not fueling enough and if you're not eating enough, that has an impact on energy, what we call energy availability. So you're not going
Yes.
to have enough energy to support your exercise, but also to support basic daily functions of what your body needs. And I liken that to, I'm always doing this because my phone always runs out of battery. Basically, what happens is it's like exactly with your phone. When it's running out of
Yes.
battery, the applications don't work as well, and it's just not as efficient. That's exactly what happens with our body. And then layer on micronutrient deficiencies. And I particularly pick on iron because we know that running women, one of the micronutrients that we need to watch is iron. And
Mm.
they are at risk of becoming iron deficient, particularly if they're plant-based and not eating meat. So
Yeah.
that's another kind of added risk in there as well. And then I guess for me, the other one that I tend to see, because I tend to see people in clinic sometimes when they've got problems. So I'm seeing a lot of stress fractures that are happening because when we've got
Mm.
fast weight loss, which is what happens with a lot of these medications, that has a negative impact on what we call weight loss induced bone loss. Now, that
Okay.
could happen whether or not you're doing a drastic diet. And the similar thing is it can happen also with these medications as well. Now, what I must really highlight, Shona, is that the research in the bone health world is very little. And you've got some studies showing that the impact is negative, some studies showing that the impact is kind of neutral. So we still
Okay.
don't know what's happening, but just physiologically, we know that bones are also a dynamic organ that need fueling. And it's
Mm.
something that for women in the midlife, we know we need to watch because that is one of the things that decreases as we go through the perimenopause transition.
Yeah. And so how do you advise your clients or the athletes that you are working with? And can I just say, I always mention this because we speak athletes, and then whenever I speak to a female runner, they're like, "Oh, but I'm not an athlete." And I'm like, but if you put your running shoes on and you go right foot, left foot, you're an athlete. Okay. So for everyone listening,
Totally.
when I'm speaking about athlete, that's what I'm talking about. And so how if you do have a runner who is using these GLP-1 agonists, how do you then advise them to balance that with their training or with their fueling to ensure that they are not having this bone loss or these
Yeah.
negative effects of energy availability?
Fantastic question again. And I would say initially, the first thing I'm going to be wanting you to do is just eat enough.
Okay.
And that so if you're not feeling hungry, then we talk about small, frequent meals being the easier way to do it. So instead of just having 3 main meals, you might end up having 5 little meals, mini meals. And then the second thing I'd say is maximize what we call energy density. So basically, because your appetite is so reduced, you want every bite to have as much nutrition in it as possible. So that might just basically mean adding things like peanut butter or avocado, or almond, to your porridge in the morning, for example, you might put in some ground almonds or add in some nut butter. Or instead of maybe snacking on fruit, you might snack on dried fruit, because that's more energy dense and can give you the kind of calories that you actually need. So I think the first one is energy overall. Then the second is really making sure you're maximizing protein intake. Because one of the things that we've seen, or what we see in the research is that you lose a lot of weight, and unfortunately, 25 to 40% of that weight can be muscle mass.
Oh gosh. Oh wow. I never realized it was that much.
Yes, absolutely. So we are absolutely not wanting that as midlife women. That is a huge risk factor in terms of running, because you will tell me, to be a better runner up those hills, you need to have a better power to weight ratio. You need to be keeping those muscles. And so that is a huge risk factor. So how do we protect our muscle mass? Well, we protect our muscle mass firstly by getting the stimulus. That's the most important thing, and that's resistance training. So I'll kind of leave that to you to talk about. And then you have to then have the right environment, and that means eating enough protein. Now, so, again, you'd start with the recommendations in the research is 70 grams, but I actually think even 70 grams is on the real lower end.
Yeah.
So I'm saying you almost need to be getting, for your body weight, at least 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight. Now that's hard because protein fills you up. Now,
Yeah.
and if you're already feeling full, you're going to struggle doing that. So again, it's those mini meals, and it's spreading out your protein across those mini meals. And then when you go for your run, really maximizing that you get that 20 to 30 grams of protein after your run to maximize the recovery after a run.
Okay. Yeah, we speak about this often, and so I'm just always so happy when someone else comes on and mentions these things, because it comes out of someone else's mouth, around extra protein and fueling and all the rest. And we actually did a podcast recently where spoke about my own journey and how I was training quite hard. I was training for the Two Oceans ultramarathon down in Cape Town, and but was actually losing muscle mass over that time. Not because I was running too much. My running mileage wasn't dramatic at all, but just because I wasn't eating enough. And so I was actually under fueling and losing muscle mass in that process. And so I actually can't believe that. I've never read that. And so thank you for that little bit there around that. You said 20 to 45% of muscle mass
25 to 40%
of the weight loss could be muscle.
Yeah. And obviously at the moment, that's where the research is trying to focus, right?
Okay.
So the pharmaceutical companies are trying to come out, these latest drugs that have come out, they're looking to try and protect muscle mass a little bit more. But we still cannot get away from, when we look at, and I keep on going when we look at the research, because obviously, being an evidence-based practitioner, that's where we look as a first port of call. But when we look at the research, we see that the people who take GLP-1 medications in a holistic framework, so adding on their resistance exercise, adding on their, balanced, healthy eating, and also really important, the psychological element, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. The outcomes that they have are way better. And for me, the important thing is the outcomes that they have in the long term are also way better, because this is the other thing that we're also seeing is that as soon as you come off these drugs, like what happens when you take a blood pressure medication, everything comes back. So the food noise comes back with a vengeance. You then start eating. If you haven't changed your eating patterns, your weight gain is not the exception after you stop these GLP-1 antagonists. It is the rule. So how then are you going to manage that? And we know that in terms of when we look at these large trials and that look at weight maintenance, we know that one of the things that is really important in weight maintenance is muscle mass. And so it's really important that we focus on maximizing that, so we lose the minimum amount of muscle mass when we're on the medication, and that becomes a real priority in terms of weight maintenance. Because, again, I think this conversation goes deeper, because we talk about the fact that if somebody has diabetes or heart disease, they're on a medication and they're on a medication for life, and there's no stigma attached to that. But there's so much stigma attached to weight management and being overweight. So there's that conversation around, actually, if for some people they choose to be on this medication for their whole life, that is absolutely fine. That might be the best thing for them. But when we layer on it, here in the UK, we've got the National Health Service. In South Africa, you've got medical aid. In the National Health Service, the criteria to get the medications is very high, and they're only giving it to you for 2 years.
Okay.
I'm not sure what's happening in South Africa in terms of medical aid, but I'm not sure they're going to be giving it to you for a lifetime.
No.
So you're either forking out for the medication yourself, which then becomes expensive. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, I read a survey done in the States showing that actually only 6% of users are planning to stay on it for life.
Oh, wow.
So we have 94% of people not planning to stay on it. And I think the message needs to be really, when you go on it, if you're choosing or considering going on it, use it as a tool, but also think about how you leverage that tool while you're using it and what life after looks like.
Yeah, and that is just huge. I mean, and I want to come back to some of the muscle mass aspects, but just to because that you speak around a chronic sort of use of this, leveraging that surely comes down to different behavioral or lifestyle kind of changes that we do, right? And so resistance training being one of them.
Yeah.
We punt that a lot. I mean, Nikki, my co-host, who's on the show, normally she's always like, "Don't worry, guys, Shona's going to mention some strength training aspects in a second," like, because it always comes up. And so obviously, those sort of lifestyle behavioral aspects. And so what are some of the others? You did mention around, perhaps the psychological aspects. What are some of those that we have to really concentrate on? And then I'll follow up with another question after that as well.
Yeah, and I think, we could have another whole podcast in this aspect. And obviously, I'm not a psychologist, but these are the questions that I ponder. The research at the moment is done on people who are obese. We actually have no research for what that looks like for people who just need to lose less than 10% of their body weight. That's an issue, right? So I think, and for me, what I'm seeing in my clinical practice is that's the biggest amount of users is people in that kind of bracket. And then I think that, food, we eat because we're physically hungry, but we eat because of a hell of a lot of other things, and we eat because of in our environment, we eat because of emotion, we eat because it's social. And when we take away perhaps one of the aspects, you're no longer hungry. And I've had clients saying to me, I'm scared because I'm not able to enjoy food the same way as I did with my family. I'm going on holiday and I actually want to stop taking it so I can actually enjoy food.
Yes.
And more than that, if you perhaps, seek or eat excess amounts of food because you are trying to fill an emotional void, what happens is when you suddenly take that crutch overnight, what is your coping mechanism?
Yeah.
And so for me, this is where it goes back all the time to, we need to look at health within a holistic lens. And that means not just what you put in your plate and how you move, but also how you think, what's going on in your mind, how you deal with stress, how you deal with life's curveballs. What are your coping strategies? How does stress show up for you? How do you nourish your inner you? And those are all so important for just general well-being, performance, but also weight management. And then I think that we live in a society and a culture, particularly in the West, where we equate being thin to being more attractive, to perhaps being healthier. And perhaps we need to challenge that norm. Is it about being strong?
Yeah.
And does that then mean I need to, I like doing running because it's a really good stress management tool that I use. And I like being strong when I run. So then if I need to be strong when I run, I need to fuel myself when I run. Maybe that means I'm a couple kilograms over my ideal, but it's this, I think we need to really challenge how we view ourselves in society, how society views us, and what we as individuals want. How do we want to live our midlife? I definitely want to live it strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely love that. And I mean, we see these things and it's obviously just because the algorithm puts them in front of me because I follow them, but strong is the new skinny. And we I absolutely believe that that's the way we need to go. And I grew up in born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, and skinny was the be all, right?
Absolutely.
But a lot of that narrative needs to change in and around. Let's ensure that we're getting strong, because obviously bones, muscles, all the good things, running, all of those things. But again, in later on in life, I mean, I want to be able to get off the toilets by myself. I want to be all of those things. So to be able to take out of that muscle bank later on, for me, is so important. And I just love the way you describe that. And I think that changing that narrative is so important. And it's funny though, because I believe that, and I want to help change that narrative, and yet it still affects me. I mean, I don't not eat enough, or did not eat enough because I was trying to maintain weight. It was just I just didn't want to eat that much. I just don't actually get that hungry. That was my own personal sort of going through that. But I think just constantly thinking around that, like fueling your training, because it's going to help you be a better athlete. It's going to help you stay stronger. And so I love the way you put that. And maybe then just a follow up to that question is if we could change all of those lifestyle habits, could the GLPs essentially then be, as you mentioned, like a tool, like a starting point, just to get you on the right sort of track, but then you have the right lifestyle things in place. So could it then not have to be a chronic form of medication? Would you think we'd be able to come off that then if we have those lifestyle things in place? If you want to recover from sessions faster, not feel tired all the time, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join me in my upcoming training specifically for female runners over the age of 45. In it, I'll share with you my simple 5-step framework that will transform your running. Simply scan the QR code on screen now, or click on the link in the description to save your seats in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think that that's exactly how we should be using it. We leverage the fact that perhaps, that it's about finding tools within your toolkit. If that's one of the tools you're choosing to use, you have to leverage it. You have to understand how to nourish yourself physically, how to move, and how to deal in terms of emotion. But, human nature very often is that we don't necessarily we don't do that until there's a problem. We're not very proactive about doing things. And I think the need to be proactive if you are going on these drugs is just such an important message. And also to think about not just the short term, but life after. So if you are just using them as a tool, how then are you going to keep those habits so that becomes part of your identity? So then in the long term, you're able to kind of maintain the results that you get using these very, very powerful drugs.
Yeah, I love that. And just maybe to bring it back to the training a little bit. And so in running is obviously I think we have tons of runners who are listening to this podcast, and lots of people who are just generally active. But if we're speaking running specifically, and you mentioned if you start using the GLPs in the beginning, there is that feeling of energy or just lack of energy or fatigue. Those are symptoms we're already feeling perhaps in the perimenopause phase as well. And so my training brain just comes into play, and to say, obviously we would then need to manipulate some of our training variables so that we are managing that initial process, right? And so from your perspective, from a nutritional perspective, what are some of the aspects that we would do in that time when, if I'm perhaps as a coach saying, let's take a little bit more recovery, obviously ensuring the resistance training, but if you are feeling tired, don't push beyond that, adapt from a high intensity to a low intensity session. From your perspective as a performance nutritionist, what are some of the aspects that we'd really focus on in that initial phase, perhaps?
Yeah, fantastic question again. So, I've just actually been working with a marathon runner who's taking it. And it's very much around maximizing the sports nutrition. So what she's doing around her training. So, the constants, I still wanted to eat her breakfast, her lunch, her snack and dinner. But then just making sure that she has a pre-exercise snack. So that could be anything from a slice of bread with some jam on it, some fruit-flavored yogurt, a banana, and then maximizing what she's doing during, again. So if she hasn't managed to have her pre-exercise snack, that puts a little bit more pressure in terms of what she's doing during. And so we
Yes.
know that carbohydrates is what your muscles and your brain love. And so again, starting off maybe at, between 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate per hour, that could be sports drink, gel, dried fruit, whatever it is that you like.
Mm-hmm.
And then really, again, leaning on the protein for the recovery afterwards. And so that could be anything from, a smoothie that you make on your own using some kind of yogurt and some fruit. It could be my favorite, chocolate milk. Or it just could be, something that you're eating like a sandwich afterwards. But in general, liquid calories are easier to absorb and make you feel less full. So I'm probably leaning more on liquid calories around your sport, just to optimize your energy and also recovery afterwards as well.
Awesome. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, chocolate milk is my go-to as well. Absolutely. Probably the day I read that initial study on chocolate milk being so good for recovery, I was so over the moon. And it's definitely one of the ones that I love to promote as well.
Yeah.
No,
And
that
I'll just
yeah.
maybe add to that, Shona, that
Mm,
being prepared is everything, because um, it's not, your plan is not going to be successful if you don't, your environment doesn't make that the healthy eating the easy choice. So for
mm,
example, before I go do a long run or before I go do my long high rocks training session,
mm.
I find such joy in preparing my recovery snack and leaving it in my fridge. So literally as I walk through the door, shoes off, socks off, I'm drinking my recovery drink. And that just means that also you allow your blood sugar levels to stay nice and stable. Nausea is one of the biggest symptoms that people experience when they're on these medications. And nausea is usually to do with dehydration. So again, make sure you're sipping away at that water and maybe even getting some electrolytes in there. But also managing your blood sugar levels. And so that basically means not leaving long periods of time, more than 3 or 4 hours without eating. So just making sure you've got easily accessible, nutritious snacks around just optimizes your blood sugar levels and is just going to help negate some of the side effects you might be experiencing and just give you more energy, which is exactly what you need.
Okay. You've just hit the nail on the head. That is my issue. When the process of me having gone through that and seeing my muscle mass sort of take this dive bomb, even though I was doing strength twice a week, and running, but yeah, just not eating enough. And mine is preparation, because you mentioned you get so much joy from doing that. I get zero joy
Okay.
from preparing any kind of food. It's honestly,
Oh,
I
really?
don't
So
enjoy
what's
cooking.
how have you overcome that then?
I don't think I have quite yet. But so I really try and concentrate on just fueling in and around the training sessions. So
Okay.
making sure that I'm having pre, during, and then focusing after, and that is the go-to, steri stuff, chocolate milk. And really focusing on that. I am trying to now food prep a little bit more so that it doesn't have to be daily prep, so that it's almost a
Yeah.
prep prepping one day for a couple of days. That I find really, really effective. Yeah, because I just don't. I mean, I hardly have a kitchen. My house is very small, and I'm quite grateful for that. But
Mm.
but yeah, just trying to then prep once for an amount of time. I don't mind eating the same meal over and over again. That doesn't actually bother me. So prepping a meal and then eating on that for a day or two seems to be the way to go at the moment. And then a smoothie is also the go-to, because then it is just it is quite obviously calorie dense, but then can
Yeah.
add in a whey protein if need be. So I haven't quite figured it out yet. So maybe
Yeah.
we need to have another episode with you where you can help me with that. But it's just because the prep is really my downfall.
Yeah.
I just don't enjoy it.
Could I just add something in here? Because
Please.
there's a lot of focus at the moment, particularly in the British media, around ultra-processed foods and how we need to eat less ultra-processed foods. And I totally, I'm whole foods all the way, but we
Mm,
also need to be practical that we're all probably busy people who
mhm,
struggle to food prep. And so what I would almost be wanting you to do is also lean into some of the convenience foods. So for example, somebody might say to me, well, Linia, the chocolate milk has some emulsifiers or it's got some other additives and things like that. And it does. And so making your own will probably be a better choice. But if you're not going to make your own, the
mhm,
shop bought one is a good alternative. And then I'd be saying to you, what can you add to make that even more nutritious? So it might be that I add a banana or I add some blueberries, which is whole foods, to kind of negate from the fact that perhaps I am eating something that is is classified in inverted commas as ultra processed food.
Mm.
But some food processing is absolutely essential for us to make sure that we're getting the nutrients in as well. So I think it's also not putting pressure on yourself to be this domestic goddess that makes every energy ball from scratch.
Mm.
That would be amazing. And sometimes I get that right on a Sunday for my week, and sometimes I don't. And
Yeah.
so when I don't, it's then using, convenience foods and then just adding good nutrition to it to kind of take it up a level.
Yeah, and I've actually found that, I know we're going off topic here very quickly, but I actually have found that so effective. I do buy some ready-made meals that are,
Yeah.
they're not necessarily superbly ultra processed because they're made in a private sort of capacity, not from like a big sort of global shop or whatever. And I find that very useful. So then at least my one meal
Yeah.
is quite a big meal. And then I absolutely love salads. So like a tuna salad for me is my go-to. So I'll very often prep that, and I love that. So yeah, protein aspects is one that I need to improve on quite a bit from there. I mean, I love meat and all the rest. So yeah, I think that is I'm getting there. It's baby
Good.
steps, and I know our listeners are following me on this journey as well. So but yeah, and so maybe just going back to that, and I mentioned protein now, but just going back to that muscle mass aspect. I mean, for you mentioned around 1.2 grams per body weight. I mean, that is a lot. So for me, I mean, I'm 68 or 70 kgs. So, I mean, that's like 90 grams of protein per day, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how would you manage that, or suggest or recommend that people manage that throughout the day? Because especially
Why
for someone
don't you give me,
like
perfect. So why don't you tell me what you're currently having, and then I'll tell you how you can get the protein in there. So what are you having for breakfast? You're putting me on the spot
Yeah,
here.
probably. Yeah, you really are. It's good. I'll probably have like some oats. Whether I've put those in the fridge overnight, or just sort of pop them. They are easy, like oats are easy, so they're ones that can be ready made. And I am trying to have a few more eggs here and there. So like
Okay.
sort of
Could I go
boiled eggs
back to
where
your
I can.
oats?
Yes,
So you're making your oats with milk, or you're making them with water?
milk.
Okay, so then I would say with oats, for example, how I'd maximize protein there is I would maybe do half oats, half leftover quinoa, or a ready sachet, because quinoa has a slightly higher protein content. So almost get like a quinoa porridgey thing going on. Then I would make it with milk. And then maybe if I needed to add, you probably need a little bit more protein. What I'll do is either I would stir in a little bit of some ground almonds, or I would perhaps have some Greek yogurt on the side, for example. So there and add some nuts and seeds as well. So there, and berries obviously, because that's the color. So just small changes up your protein intake. And then eggs is a solid one, eggs on toast, but that could also be smoked salmon, avocado on toast, or even baked beans on toast, for example, as well.
Okay, that's amazing. I mean, I love that. That sounds like a lot for me. So just interestingly, like in terms of oats, and then you mentioned like a yogurt on the side. But yeah, I mean that sounds like a lot.
But what I would say as women in the midlife, where do you need to be eating more calories earlier on in the day? So
Yes.
perhaps what needs to happen is, if I'm giving you more in the morning and getting that balance right, particularly protein, you need to hit your protein numbers at the morning. So I'm looking at 20 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast.
Oh wow. Okay.
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 And then actually your lightest meal needs to be dinner. And so what would happen then is you're waking up and you're actually hungrier. And
Hungry.
so
Okay.
suddenly I'm shifting where I want the calories to be, and I'm
Okay.
shifting your responses around that. So
Oh,
very
I
often
love
people who say to me, I'm not hungry, it's because they're still digesting dinner. Because
dinner.
perhaps
Oh,
they've
yeah.
eaten too much at dinner or too late.
Yeah, probably, and that sounds exactly like me. So I think you're spot on. And maybe let me just do a little shameless plug here, because I've seen I haven't read your menopause. What's your book? Your cook? What's it called?
I've
Please.
just got food for menopause. I've just
Food
actually
for
got it here at the
menopause.
back.
There we go.
It's got all these recipes, which is, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I mean, and we'll tap on that a little bit in the end. But I just wanted to mention that. So these are excellent ideas. So I hope that everyone, and those of you who struggle like I do, I think those are excellent tips. But yeah, I think okay. So moving on from the GLPs, and when I did present at that Thrive conference with you in Cape Town, I mean, I loved the talk that you gave, the presentation that you gave, and one of the things we spoke around, or you spoke around, was gut health. And particularly for this menopausal transitional peri and post menopause. So what are the changes within the gut health? Why do they change, and what is happening that we need to really start focusing on this in particular?
Yeah, so I talk about it in the book. I mention the fact that, physiologically, if we look at what's happening in a woman's cells as she goes through the midlife, is there's a metabolic story which I've touched on, the fact that
Mm,
she processes, carbohydrates and fats particularly differently. There's an inflammation story, but there's also a gut health story.
mm.
And the gut health story is basically that women in the midlife have a different composition of microbes in their intestine. So if we go all the way back to the beginning, men and women have different gut bacteria. Women in general have a more diverse gut bacteria.
Okay.
Okay. Having a diverse gut bacteria is good because we know that a diverse bacteria is a thriving microbiome. And we know the microbiome is involved in everything from hormonal regulation, immune support to metabolism. Okay. As we go through the perimenopause transition, that diversity decreases to become similar to a man. So we have decreased diversity. And when we look at the type of bacteria that we have, we seem to have more of the bacteria that are called inflammatory bacteria. So bacteria that are causing inflammation and obesogenic bacteria. So basically the bacteria that basically take every single calorie out of everything you are eating. Okay. Which are the two things we absolutely do not want.
Yes.
So we need to. So one of the pillars of menopause nutrition is eating to nourish our gut bacteria. So our bacteria are alive and living. So like we like to eat, they also like to eat, and their
Mm.
favorite thing to eat is fiber. So a lot of talk about protein today. But another understated, underspoken nutrient is fiber. And so we need to be eating more fiber. And in the last nutrition survey in the UK, it showed that 96% of us are not eating enough fiber.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And so that means that we have gut bacteria that are not being fed enough.
Okay.
And if you imagine that your gut bacteria live in a house, if there's
Mm.
no food in your pantry, what happens? Your gut bacteria almost start eating the wallpaper. And that's
Okay.
exactly what happens in your intestine. They
Yes.
start eating away the lining of your gut bacteria, which
Mm.
means that it becomes more porous and leaky. You don't want that because that
Yeah.
means then, substances that shouldn't be traveling through that lining start traveling through that lining, and that impacts inflammation.
Okay.
Now, when we look at the whole complex, all the complex symptoms women experience, brain fog, lack of concentration, pain for joints, which impacts running,
Mm.
those are all inflammatory conditions.
Okay.
And so can you see how gut health becomes a mediator in terms of our optimal well-being? So if I was to say, well, what can we do about it? Then I'll
Mm.
say three things.
Mm.
You need to make sure that you are eating a varied diet. So sorry, Shona, you like eating the same thing.
Not good
I've got
enough.
you.
Not good enough. That's okay. That's good. That's a good thing to learn as well.
But what I would say is simple things like
Yes.
if you like adding almonds or snacking on almonds, buy a mixed bag of nuts or mix
Okay.
them up
Mm.
yourself because you get the
Mm.
variety. If you always like eating an apple, buy different types of apples. So you're
Okay.
not always
Okay.
eating Granny Smith.
Mm.
Instead of just buying the salad which is rocket, buy a mixed bag of lettuce leaves
Okay.
because that
Yeah.
variety actually is good. So eat variety. So this is why we talk about eating the rainbow. The second thing is eat enough fiber. Now, ironically, actually, if I was to ask you, I'm going to turn it over to you, which are the foods that contain the most fiber? What would you think that would be?
Oh my gosh.
I'm
Dr.
sorry, I'm
Linia.
putting you
No,
on
no,
the
no, 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 no.
spot.
That's fine. You're welcome to put me on the spot, but it just shows you how little I know about that. Yeah, I mean, so I sometimes have all bran flakes, and in my mind, that's my fiber intake.
Okay.
Yeah, and some fruits and veg would be my answer there. But again, if I wouldn't be able to sort of specifically
Interesting.
tell you,
Well, you got
yeah.
one right. So the foods that have the most amount of fiber are whole grains. So that would be
Okay, yes.
your whole oats, your brown rice, your red rice, your whole grain bread, quinoa, etc. So my whole grains. The second is beans and lentils.
Okay.
They're the ones that have the biggest bang for our buck in terms of fiber. Ironically, you mentioned fruit and vegetables, and I feel that
Mm,
this is where there's lots of myths around fiber. So fruit and vegetables do contain vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, and
yes.
some fiber. But if I have 100 grams of whole grains or legumes, I have 8 to 10 grams of fiber. If I have 100 grams of fruit or vegetables, I have 2 to 3
Oh,
grams of fiber. So if
excellent.
I'm going to be chasing my 30
Yeah.
grams a day of fiber, where am I going to get best bang for my buck?
Yeah.
Whole grain carbohydrates. And
Exactly.
guess what your running muscles love, ladies? Whole grain carbohydrates
Yeah. Okay.
as
There
a
we go.
fuel.
So
So
that's
what
a
I
bang for
love
your buck
about
there.
nutrition exactly is it's very,
Mm,
very interlinked. So the same
yes.
things that fuel our muscles also nourish our gut bacteria. The more we nourish our gut bacteria, the better overall our energy levels will be, our hormones will be, and our well-being will be as well.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so you mentioned 30 grams of fiber
Yeah,
per,
so,
per
so
day.
sorry,
Okay.
and thank you for taking me back to that.
No
So
worries.
variety, eat
Yes.
enough fiber, 30 grams, and the third would be include something fermented in your day, in your day every day. So what do I mean by that? Something like BioLive yogurt or kefir, or it could be miso or tempeh or sauerkraut. Those the last ones we don't eat often in the Western diet, but the
Yes.
first ones, the BioLive yogurt, is probably something that we could look at having. So if you're not having it for breakfast, then you're looking at maybe having it as a dessert later on. Then so for example, if I have a low protein meal, like could be pasta pesto, that doesn't have much protein in that meal. So then I'm wanting to maximize how much protein I have. Maybe dessert might be a small yogurt with some compote on it.
Okay. Oh my gosh, and I'm so glad that was your third thing because I was going to ask you about the fermented foods, and yeah, the effects of those because obviously you see, and again, as you can see, nutrition is not my strong point. I mean, I'm not a nutritionist, but yeah, we see so much of this online and on the socials, and I think as women, it's difficult to ascertain what is really important and versus what is not because there's so much out there. But okay, so those are the those are the three things we need to hit. So essentially, to be
Yeah.
protecting and nourishing our gut.
Yeah, and then I guess the counter of it would be obviously your gut bacteria also don't like some things. So what don't they like? They
Mm,
don't like you to have too much sugar. They don't like you to have artificial sweeteners, so bye-bye Diet Cokes done regularly.
mhm.
They don't like too much alcohol, and they like you to move, and they like you to sleep.
Yeah. There we go.
So
All
it
the
comes
things that we
back to the
talk about.
pillars.
Yeah,
Exactly, it comes back
exactly.
to the
Coming back to
wellness
all the
pillars.
really
Yeah.
important recovery,
Yep.
fueling. So no, I love that. And then just to link with that question with fiber, obviously as runners, we tend to experience runners trots or that is a commonly known concern.
Mm.
How do we manage that within? I just know particularly before my long runs, I tried, like I do generally recommend to maybe reduce that fiber intake,
Yeah.
particularly before race day. Is that fine to be able to sort of periodize that fiber intake
Yeah.
with your running?
And exactly. And I'll say two things there is that we also know, the hidden ally to performance is gut health. We know that athletes who have more diverse, more thriving guts are also able to manage a higher proportion of carbohydrates in terms of during exercise training. And so in terms of, this is not running, but if we look at cycling, like the Tour de France riders, a part of their diet is really optimizing gut health because they're taking the majority of the calories while they're on the bike.
Yes.
So I would almost be saying, when you go through training, you're kind of getting your fueling strategy. Part of that needs to be gut health. So how are you optimizing gut health? Because if you optimize gut health, you might find that you're less sensitive to kind of getting the runner's diarrhea and things like that. But absolutely, part of that as well is perhaps before a long run going low fiber, and that might be something that kind of helps as well. But still, I'll be saying to you, I want you to before then be focusing on getting something fermented in your diet so that your
Right.
gut health is more receptive to the foods that it's actually getting on board.
I love that. Absolutely love that. Okay. That is amazing, Dr. Linia. Thank you. Any
Sure.
parting shots from you before I close and anything that you think we've left out that you feel I mean that's a very loaded question because that's an entire podcast on its own, I'm sure. But yeah, something that you want to leave our listeners with, like a parting shot from you.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken about so much and
Mm.
in this conversation. Sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming because then I'm just, I've given you 101 different
Yeah.
things to kind of focus on. And I would probably say, if I can leave you two things, is the first
Mm.
that just do one thing. A lot of the time we get so bombarded with 101 different ways to unlock performance and potential and try this and try that. And so we almost don't even know where to begin. But the high performers that I look after, what are they good at doing? They're really good at doing the basic things consistently.
Yeah.
So I would almost say, keep it simple. Take a step back, keep it simple. Find one thing that you think that has resonated with you in this conversation, that you think that you want to adopt. Take that thing, just do that one thing, but be consistent with how you do it. That doesn't mean you need to give it 100% every time, but it means that you need to be consistent at showing up and doing it, maybe that 5% one day, 40% the next day, 70%.
Yes.
So just one thing. And then the second is I would say, in a world where we have so many voices that are external, I really encourage the people that I look after to tune into themselves. And so part of this midlife journey that we go on is about knowing you. So dialing back and knowing you so that you know what your, baseline normal is. You know what your telltale signs to perhaps overtraining might look like, or underfueling might look like. Know you so that you know what should be on your plate to make you feel like you've got more energy and that you're recovering well. And also knowing you so that you know how to top up your tank, because we have to look at optimum performance, whether that's running or whether just going through the midlife, in a holistic framework. And that also means we need to look after our inner us and our nourish your inner you as well.
Oh, amazing. See, I told you, everyone listening, that it was an absolute honor to present with you, and I was blown away from that. So, and I love the way you put that. So yeah, thank you so much. And if people want to reach out to you, if they want to get in touch with you, where can people reach you? How can they get hold of you? Where can they get your book? What will be best?
So on social media, I am Linia Nutrition, and that would be on Instagram and Facebook, and just Dr. Linia Patel on LinkedIn. And if you want a copy of my book, it is available on all Amazons. So, and in South Africa, it's available on Takealot.
Brilliant. Excellent. Good. We will pop those into the show notes for everyone as well. So yeah, Dr. Linia, thank you so much. I actually can't, I was just looking at the time. I can't believe time went so quickly. I'm sure we'd love to have you on the pod again some other time. But again, it was absolute honor to have you on and to connect again. And so thank you so much for your time as well. All right.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Brilliant. Good. Thanks everyone for listening. We will hear and see you all again next week. And if you have any questions on these topics, please pop them in the comments below. There is also a link where you can send in a video question or a written question. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. And if these are some of your experiences and what's worked for you and what hasn't. But other than that, we will see you guys all again next week. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.